Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for taking your time on this Thursday morning to join our What Matters to Germans webinar in 2024. What matters? And what matters to Germans? So we're going to be presenting all of the learnings we have about the theme of regenerative sustainability, which is the focus of what the What Matters report. A little bit more about that later. First of all, as I say, a big welcome, and I'm delighted to be here with my colleague Anita. We'll be sharing the presentation, so you'll be hearing a little bit more from Anita later. Now, what are we going to talk to you about today? Well, we will obviously focus on our What Matters 2024 report, as I say, with a focus on Germany. So it's based on an international piece of work, but we have a special focus on Germany with, we hope, lots of nice examples about how these ideas translate into the specific German culture and specific German context. We'll start off by a quick introduction to Humanate, for those of you who don't know us, and then of course there will be time for questions at the end of the webinar. So, Humanate, who are we? Well, the What Matters report actually bases its name on our company claim, which is Do What Matters. Humanate is an old and a new company. We kicked off as Humanate with our new name, our new brand in 2023. And last year came with a lot of changes. For me personally, as someone from the former company, Happy Thinking People, joining forces with Humanate, but also as a company, we're making lots of progress and moving forward with many new ideas. So who are we? We are a human-driven consultancy, and our mission is to connect people and culture with the work that we do for our clients. We believe that we need to anchor positive change for companies in robust and forward-thinking human understanding. So we need to understand the human element of the companies and the brands we work for in order to connect brands with people. From that, we have three key values which we believe we need to follow. The first one is people, putting the human mindset at the core of everything we do. The second is perspective, so a holistic perspective on thinking, not just following one train of thought or one data point, but taking multiple perspectives to deliver a 360-degree view. And finally, partnership. We have long-standing relationships with lots of our clients, and we believe that these relationships are really important, and that partnering on our work together with clients is what will drive positive change for brands and for organizations. So many of you, or some of you, may remember us as Happy Thinking People. We were one of the largest independent qualitative research companies in Germany or in the broader DACH region. Now we've joined forces with Humanate. That doesn't mean we've disappeared completely. We still continue to deliver all of the things that you know us for. High quality ad hoc research, often with a qualitative focus, sometimes combining approaches that take place in consumers' own time and homes, like, for example, insight communities, with real-time research, like focus groups, depth interviews that can take place online and offline. But by becoming Humanate, we are really excited about all the new things we have to offer. First of all, we have really enhanced strategic consultancy capabilities. With our colleagues from Space Doctors, we can offer strategic understanding that is anchored in cultural understanding, is anchored in semiotics, and that's something that we're really excited about, and we're cooperating now a lot with Space Doctors on many of our projects. Then we have new ways of approaching innovation. We have our own creative crowdsourcing platform, IACA, that helps us to develop completely new ideas with a global team of creatives, people around the world. And last but not least, we also have more technology and just more capabilities when it comes to data analytics. We have our own proprietary platform for communities called The Square, which works both short-term and long-term. And that comes from Insights Consulting, the company we joined forces with. And with our colleagues in the US, from the company that used to be called Gongos, we have exciting new models for data analytics, which we're also using more and more in our daily work. So in summary, we've become a more global organization. We have offices all around the world, 2 offices in Germany as well, and 1 in Switzerland. And we're a combination of 10 heritage companies, not only with different geographies, but also with different competences and capabilities. And in Humanate, we're bringing all of those different perspectives together. And maybe also worth noting, we're going to be talking about regenerative sustainability. That's something that we would also like to embrace for ourselves. It's something that is guiding us as a company. We want to build our positive impact on the planet. And we're also currently working towards a B Corp certification for the whole organization. So that leads us to what matters. As I said before, we're going to be talking about regenerative strategies. That sounds very abstract, so let's take a minute to explain what we mean. In essence, it's about going from less harm to more good. We can't alter the past, but we can think about how we can shape the future. We will look at the underlying frictions and needs that consumers have in this context, expectation towards brands, what people say versus what they do. It's not a trend report. This is really a story about what we think matters. The pressure on people and the planet is extremely high. 2/3 of people around the world, including Germany, are really worried about the future. That worry is economical, it's political, it's societal, but of course it's also environmental. And in our What Matters report, we want to take all of those aspects into account. This is not just a story about the environment, that is central, it's a story about regenerative on a more cross-cultural level. We also see that 67% of people in Germany, even more globally, 78%, believe that we have to move beyond sustaining into reversing the damage that we have done. We need to change our mindset and start thinking in regenerative ways to actively restore and reimagine our society, our communities, and our ecological systems. And lastly, it's on all of us. We all have a role to play. 75% of people in Germany, in fact, 85% worldwide, really feel that brands need to take a responsibility. There is sometimes a bit of a blame game when it comes to sustainability. People think that the governments should take more responsibility. Brands think consumers need to take more responsibility. Everyone sort of sees the responsibility with someone else, but we need to take responsibility, all of us, and the time is now. So protecting what's there is no longer enough. At the moment, we're sort of focusing on the state of maintaining the state of the environment and the communities, but this status quo mindset is not going to be enough for the future. We need to change how we do things and safeguard the well-being of present and future generations. We will try to help you to understand what that means in concrete terms. We have some very, very concrete codes that we think can guide us on this journey. Let's embark on our What Matters journey. Now, before we do that, very briefly, a little bit about what we actually did. So I'm not going to go into all the details of the method. You can read more about that in the overall report. But we started off with our colleagues from Space Doctors with a cultural and semiotic analysis, looking at what's out there, looking at the cultural change, and identifying 4 key dimensions that Anita will explain to you in a second. From those dimensions, we use Cultural AI and our Changemaker network to identify 8 concrete codes of how we can make those things happen. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. We injected those codes into a global insight community. Germany was part of the insight community, some other European countries, North America, Asia Pacific and Africa. So it's really a global community. And then once we'd identified the key factors and aspects, we quantified them with over 13,000 consumers, again, in Europe, in North and South America, in more countries in Asia Pacific, and expanded a little bit in Africa and the Middle East. So you will see in the report that we have different data points that we'll refer to. The first one is the mapping, and this is interesting for us because we took a look at where does Germany stand in the global perspective, and we'll see that Germany is sometimes similar to the global perspective, sometimes a little bit different, so we'll pick up on that. The second aspect is the say-do gap. You'll be hearing a lot about that during the presentation today. I have an extra slide in a second where I'll talk a little bit more about that. And in the overall report, you can also find our sector playing fields. So we looked at each of the transformation codes and we looked at how their significance in various sectors, which is also an interesting aspect. We're not going to go into that today in too much detail because the presentation, that would take a little bit too much time for the hour that we've got, but there is a lot of information in the report. So what do we mean with the say-do gap? Now, as qualitative researchers, we're very used to doing research and people saying, yeah, but that's what people say, but they actually do something different. Sometimes we make the mistake on just focusing on the behavior. Oh, well, if they do that, then that is what is true. But we need to understand that what people say, and what they think and what they feel is also true. Just because they're not acting on it doesn't mean they don't believe it. And here we see a tension, but we see that tension is also a massive opportunity. If brands can help people to bridge that say-do gap, to move into action with the things that they feel, the things that they want to do, the things that they talk about, then we can really help people to act on their intentions. More about this when we look at the individual transformation codes. I'm now going to hand over to Anita, who will introduce the general structure of the What Matters report.
Thank you, Sven, for that nice introduction. And indeed, let's dive into the results of all those studies that we have conducted. And the first result is shown on this slide. And what you see here are the 4 dimensions that we have identified and that we used to cluster all those transformation codes. Let me briefly explain all 4 to you. The first one on the upper left corner is called surgical solutions. And that's about codes that help us to very precisely and focused create actions that can have an exponential impact towards the future. Moving to the right, we have the dimension that we call courageous vision. That's all about taking the courage and being bold, creating bold ideas and visions that really revolutionize the way we think and act. Moving on to the down left corner, we have the code that we call empowered minds. And that's about enabling and empowering everyday people to become change makers and to help us drive the positive change. And then finally, on the right downside, we have the dimension called Rethink and Thrive. And that's about challenging our conventional paths and exploring alternative forms of organization. Within each of these dimensions, we have identified 2 transformation codes. And you can see all 8 of them here on the slide. And in the report that some of you might have already downloaded and that you will also get after this presentation, you will see also all of those 8 codes. For today, we have decided not to share all 8, but we will share 4 of them. And I will explain which ones in a minute. But firstly, let's look at the mapping. Sven just explained those two dimensions to you. The horizontal axis is about identification. So to what extent do people actually identify with a code? Do they recognize it? Do they say, yes, I get that, and I see that in my context? And on the vertical axis, we see the behavior, to what extent people really act upon the code. So using those two axes, we were able to map all those codes globally. The slide you see here are the global results. And on the next slide, and that's actually the data that we used for this presentation, you see the German results. Now, if you paid attention, because this goes pretty fast, you would see that overall the position of the codes is pretty similar from global to German. But there are some things that actually shift up or down. For instance, the code sharing is daring moves down, and the code director's chair moves up. That's also the reason why both of these codes will be part of this presentation. So director's chair and sharing is daring. And next to that, we will dive into the codes negative fuel and pressure points. So that's the introduction on all the codes and the 4 dimensions. And I will now start with the first code called negative fuel. Negative fuel, what is that all about? That is all about acknowledging the things that brands, organizations, societies might have done in the past that were harmful for people or the planet. And it even goes one step further. It's not just about acknowledging that those things might have happened, but it's also about taking those bad things and transforming them into something good. So taking the negative, using it as a fuel and as a resource for something beneficial in the future. Looking at the data for Germany, we see that this code has a very high identification in Germany. 69% of the respondents identifies with this, but only 1 out of 4 German peoples really acts upon this, leaving it with a very high say-do gap. And this could be super interesting because if the say-do gap is high, it also means that there is potential for brands and organizations to tap into this code. Now, what's important when we talk about this code? It's all about finishing off better than you started. Looking back to your history, to your past maybe, rethinking that, critically evaluate your past actions, and then take that negative fuel and make something positive around it. Now, I can imagine that this all still might sound a little bit abstract or even fuzzy to you. So let's look at an example because that will help clarify what we actually mean with this code. The example that we brought is from a US beer brand called Miller Lite. And what they did is they looked at their past advertisements and they were kind of sexist advertisement. And they actually turned that into something super positive. And we're going to share a video now on that example.
I have just realized that I don't think I shared my sound. So excuse me, everybody, if you could just give me a second to reshare.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's always, you think everything
That
is going to
happens when
work
you're
and
in a live
and
session.
yeah. Sorry. So be right back. Here we are. So hopefully it will work. Sorry, just get rid of this. Right, sorry.
Yes,
Here
there
we
we
go.
go.
He says.
Sven, I see in the chat that the sound is still very low. Maybe you can turn up the volume.
Sorry, I just heard that the sound wasn't very good, and we'll try to correct for the next video.
Yeah, and let me maybe briefly summarize what we just saw, because you could see the image but not the sound. What they actually did is they looked at all their historical advertisements that were pretty sexistic, because they actually said beer was invented by women, and then later on it was taken over by men. And what did men do? They put us in bikinis. So actually what they did, they used a little bit of humor to turn something bad from the past in something positive for the future. And they're not the only one. There is also a Scottish brand, Glenlivet, a Scottish single malt whiskey brand, that did something similar, but they said, our advertisement in the past has always been very male focused, showing privileged white men in leather armchairs. And they started a campaign called hashtag Break the Tradition to change that. And that actually fits really well with their brand story, which is all about breaking traditions. Now, this is an example of doing this in a very creative and humorous way, but there's also more literal ways that you can use this code to turn something negative into something positive. And that's about taking actually CO2 out of the atmosphere and doing something positive with that. There's 3 examples on this slide. I will briefly touch upon each example. The first one is in the sport and fashion category, and that's from the shoe brand called On Running. And what they did, they used CO2 to actually create the foam that they need in their running shoes. The second one is from an agriculture example. It's Climeworks, that's a Swiss company. They have technology to take CO2 out of the atmosphere and use that for something positive. And the example here is where they use it for plants in greenhouses. As we all know, plants need CO2 to be able to grow, so they actually infuse extra CO2 into the greenhouses. And then the third example on the slide is from Coty, a well-known manufacturer of fragrances like Boss, Calvin Klein, and Chloe. And they have started an innovation on being able to transform CO2 into ethanol or alcohol, that's the same, which they need for their fragrances. Now, that's a cool innovation, but it was not so easy for Coty how to express that to consumers. So they came to us and briefed us on how can we create a story and a narrative around this innovation that is really fitting the category and fitting our brands. And actually that came with quite some challenges, because just think about it, fragrances and perfumes are a very emotional category. It's not the first thing that people think about. They don't think about science when they think about fragrances and perfumes. They think about something that makes you feel better. So it's very emotional. Secondly, consumers even wonder, why do they use alcohol in perfume anyway? Consumers were not aware of that. So that's a second challenge. And thirdly, perfume and fragrances is a category that you don't buy every week. So the impact of improving that on the planet and on the environment is not something that's really top of mind with consumers. So we had to create a narrative around this that took into account all of these three challenges. And we cannot share it here, but the key learning that we found while doing this research is actually that it's very important to stay connected with consumers when you want to tell a story like this, instead of educating them on why this is good and why they are doing that, but connect to the category and the emotional relationship that people have with the category. So that was the first transformation code, and I hand back over to Sven now for the second one.
Thank you, Anita. Yes, the second one is all about surgical solutions, pressure points. Surgical solutions, yes, it's a little bit like surgery. It's about finding that one thing that you need to handle, that you need to treat in order to bring about positive change. So sometimes it's about selecting, it's about really focusing, finding the solutions that release a significant wave of change and applying your resources to a focused action. Now here we also see a high level of identification and a sort of medium level of people acting upon it. So we'll see in Germany, there are areas in people's lives where they already have these sort of simple, straightforward solutions. If I do this one thing, it's going to have a big difference or make a big difference, but that isn't everywhere. And there are probably still big opportunities to continue to build this. What are the principles of this transformation code? First of all, it's about taking a step back and thinking about, what is really important, what matters, what are the major problems. But then it's about, rather than solving all of the problems, it's about seeking a targeted action, the one thing that will have exponential impact and that will really change a lot. And by focusing, we can also help people to understand how they can come on board. Now, as I said, in Germany, we have some very specific examples that highlight this. And all of you who live in Germany, you will know a wonderful Pfandsystem that already works in a lot of areas. The yogurt glass is a big favorite amongst consumers. The 500 milliliter yogurt glass continues to expand in terms of its importance. People use it. We just did some research recently with very young consumers who also see the value of this reusable form of packaging. The deposit system has been around for a long time, from beer brands, from water brands, or from companies like Coca-Cola. And the deposit system was very, very clear and simple. If we think about surgical solutions, it's actually interesting to see what's happened with the deposit system in drinks, because we now have various deposit systems working in parallel. We have single-use packaging that has a deposit system. We have multi-use packaging that has a deposit system. And by losing that focus, we also see that consumers are sometimes a bit more confused. And more recently, we've also been working in the drinks category to understand how can we make those differences clearer again? How can we make those solutions more surgical rather than more confusing? And there are new efforts in this whole area. Some of you might have come across Recup, more and more visible in coffee shops all around Germany. It's a deposit style system for coffee to go. And what's interesting about Recup is that they've adopted a lot of the success factors of previous deposit systems. One of them is to be multi-channel, so not just to be linked to one chain of coffee shops, but actually to cross over all sorts of different coffee shops. So it becomes really easy for consumers to get on board. And with that, and with a beautiful design, a catchy name, Recup is catching on in many of the coffee shops around the country. So looking at the deposit system, thinking about it a bit further, we were asked during the pandemic to talk to consumers about the deposit system in food categories. And what we did was we set up a community and we invited people to the community who had never used zero waste shopping opportunities. So unverpackt shops where you go, where everything you buy is without packaging. It's a very, very niche area, of course, but we wanted to see what happened if we sent people to those shops who'd never used those shops before. So we set up the community and we did what we call a force exercise, which is a really interesting way of exploring these things, where we said, okay, people, you've never done this before. We're going to ask you to do this now in the coming week and to talk to us about your experiences. Now, what was really interesting was that when people went to the shop and when they did this, the shopping experience was actually extremely positive. Many people were a little bit skeptical, but when they went to the shop, not only did they come out feeling more virtuous because they'd gone shopping and they hadn't bought any packaging home, but they also saw lots of other benefits in the shop. I can buy as much as I like. Oh, there's actually quite a good choice of different things. It's not just one type of pasta that I can buy. And there are things in the zero waste shop that I can't get in my regular supermarket. So there were some really, really positive aspects of the shopping experience and people were really excited by it. But we then very quickly learned that the act of shopping is just one part of the packaging journey. Packaging also plays a role in people's homes and kitchens. It helps them to organize the things they have. When they open the cupboard, they want to be able to quickly identify the thing that they're looking for. They don't want to read or look into different containers to see what's inside them. They also want packaging to make their kitchens feel tidy. So in the community, you get lots of real life pictures. This was a picture of somebody's walk of shame of their kitchen. My kitchen doesn't look very tidy, it looks messy. This is something I want to improve. So the whole tidiness and making a kitchen look nice is really, really important. And then we saw, yes, packaging has a functional aspect, so it needs to be easy to store, easy to stack, not take up too much space in people's cupboards, and those functional aspects are really, really important. But there is also a strong aspect around design. In an ideal world, everybody would have a beautifully designed kitchen, and packaging can play a role in that, as well as in representation of the brands that I use, the products that I have on my shelf, or in my cupboards if people see those. So what do we learn from our experiences with this pressure point? For us, it became very, very clear that we need to look at the holistic experience and not just the regenerative moment. When we talk about consumer insights, we often say a good consumer insight doesn't just see the moment of consumption, it sees people's whole lives. And that is also true when we look at regenerative codes. It's not just about the actual moment of virtuousness, of having reused a piece of packaging. It's about understanding how products and brands live in people's lives, the multiple aspects they have to fulfill, both functional and emotional. And we need to understand this context if we want to identify those targeted experiences. Or to come back to the analogy of surgical solutions, when you conduct an operation, you obviously have to focus on the thing you want to operate, but you shouldn't forget the whole body around the person who you're operating. So handing back to Anita, let's move to the next code, sharing is daring. There is a video in this one as well. I hope that the sound is better. Otherwise, we will also voice over again after the video. Sorry about the sound issues we're having.
Thank you, Sven. Yes, the third code that we want to share with you today is called Sharing is Daring. And it links back to the dimension of rethink and thrive, rethinking the way we are organized in society. And the sharing economy is part of that. Now, a lot has been said already about the sharing economy. It's not a new trend, not a new code. But we also see that many initiatives fail to land with consumers. They're not really being adopted. Of course, there are some exceptions. For instance, in the mobility area, we have examples that work really well. But in other areas, it's still very hard to make people share stuff instead of owning stuff, because that's what this code is all about. It's about redefining value to move beyond transaction and ownership towards sharing and utility. And as you can see on the mapping, actually in many countries, except for China, this code is on the lower end of identification and on the lower end of actual behavior. Also in Germany, this code is on the lower end. 41% identifies with the code and only 17% acts upon it. So consumers actually want to. They identify, they say, yeah, it would be good, but they do have trouble, or they struggle to still already act upon it. Now, what is this code all about, and what could maybe help us to make the code more being accepted by consumers? It's about reconsidering what you can share, and we have a nice example of that later on. It's thinking beyond just owning products, but it's also about embracing circular thinking. It's also about reusing stuff that has been used before by other people. Now, thinking about this, maybe let's build in some interactive moments here in the presentation. I see there's 29 people in out there. Just a question, and feel free to pop your answers in the chat. Have you ever shared or borrowed any of the items on this slide? So, for example, a sewing machine or any other household equipment, a festival tent, or something else that you only need like once a year, or garden tools. And if so, why did you do it? Or if not, if you feel like I would be reluctant to do it, why wouldn't you do it? What would prevent you from doing that? What is actually hampering you of sharing these materials? I'm going to pause a moment and look at the chat to see what you are typing. I see that Bianca is typing. And Alex is typing. Camilla is typing. Nice. Okay. So Bianca says she shared her tent with her younger brother, who is a student and has no money for an own tent. Okay, so she has a positive experience of actually doing that, although close by within the family. Camilla also says, yes, I would lend share all these items. Okay, so the audience we have here is actually very open to this code. Although in general in Germany it is a bit more difficult. Yeah, Alex also says, I borrowed a tent from friends some time back. So it is happening. Super. I think you guys belong to the 70% that's already acting upon it, but 83% is not. And usually when we talk to consumers about why they don't want to do it, it's that they say, well, I don't know how others will treat my stuff. And if I want to lend it from someone else, I don't know when is it available, whenever I need it. If I need to lend it to someone, I would be afraid that they would break it. So the principle and the concept of ownership is still something that we really hang on to. Now let's go to an example, and this is again the video, so hopefully it works, else I will voice over afterwards. And the example is called Library of Things. It's an example from the UK. We all know a library of books. That's something that we are all very familiar with. You lend a book, you bring it back, we all share those books. Why not expand that to other materials beyond books? And this is an example. Let's first look at the video and then I will talk a bit more. Indeed. I see the chat. There was no sound. I also couldn't hear the sound, so we have to fix that, Sven, for the next session.
Yeah, sorry.
Let me quickly tell you what, because you've seen the images, but what they said. We looked at the opening of this event, actually, Library of Things, and what this does is you share not just books, but any kind of equipment or material that you would need. But what is so interesting about this example, and that's also why we have put it in, is that it's not just about sharing the stuff. What actually happens when people do that, and that's also pretty similar to a library of books, is when people get together and use those materials together, there also starts to kind of community starts to pop up. They help each other out. They educate each other on how to sew things, how to mend things, how to do things. So it goes beyond just the material and the functional stuff of lending something. There's a societal aspect to it. And I think that's a learning that we can take into account when we want to make those sharing initiatives more successful, the societal aspect. But there's a second aspect that is super important when it comes to this code that could help us to improve those initiatives, and that's the emotional aspect. What we learned from a couple of projects that we did in two kinds of industries is that the emotional aspect is also super important. We did projects for furniture industry and specifically on kids furniture, and we did projects on the jewelry industry. Now, both categories are highly emotional. Just imagine if you want to buy a new crib for your baby, for your newborn, you want that to be the best one because this whole experience is super emotional. And then using a crib that has already been used before might be very functional, it might be an economical wise decision, but it sometimes just doesn't feel right because you want to give the best to your newborn. Same goes for jewelry. If jewelry is made of something that has been a piece of jewelry before, so it's been pre-used, it actually diminishes the emotional value of the moment. Jewelry is often linked to special moments in life, to love often. So using something that has been pre-used has not the right connotation that consumers are actually looking for, not the right level of emotion. So when we want to do this and when we want to enhance these circularity models and embrace those circularity models, we better also speak this emotional language that consumers are looking for. And sometimes it's really simple. One of our clients actually just changed the word of pre-used into pre-loved, and then all of a sudden you already have this right positive emotion around it that you are looking for. So wrapping up this third code, the sharing economy has been there for a long time. We all feel there's value in it, but it's difficult to get it going. And some things that we have learned on what could really enhance this is take into account the social and emotional aspects of these regenerative actions. Then I hand over to Sven now for the fourth and final code.
Okay, so the final code is Director's Chair. Director's Chair is a code that revolves around themes like inclusivity and diversity. Those themes are big themes. They're things that we've been looking at in a lot of the particularly communications testing, communications exploration that we've been conducting over the past few years. Very, very big themes in general in social discussions. Now, one of the things that we see here is that it's really, really important to get to the bottom of these themes. So in Director's Chair, we see that sometimes what happens is that, and please focus on the quote here, not on the subline. We've done so many dress rehearsals, but you always find one last thing that needs to be corrected. What people often see is that with diversity strategies, inclusivity strategies, it's sometimes taken from the boardroom, or they're directed from the boardroom, and not necessarily from the people who are actually the people who have whom it actually affects. And Director's Chair is all about putting those people in the center of what we do. Now, there's some nice. So the question is, are we inclusive? Do we really recognize and support the people who are concerned, and also the people who are often unheard? What can we do to give those people a platform to tell their story, to actually change things in the world around them, in the society around them? And we really need to consider the change that they need, and not what diversity and inclusivity only does for our brand. That's part of it, but it's all about really understanding the people who are concerned. There's a really nice example here from Japan. I will show the video. Apologies to everybody who speaks Japanese, because if the sound doesn't work, but with this video you have subtitles, so hopefully you'll get an idea of what the restaurant of mistaken orders is. Yeah, we really like this example because it shows how you actually can really physically put people who are often excluded from society, people with dementia, into the core of an action. And beyond that, one of the things that I like personally about this example is when we're looking at diversity and inclusivity, particularly in communication, we sometimes see that, yes, we're becoming more diverse with regards to ethnicity, with regards to gender, but at the end of the day, there's still sometimes a danger to still stick to the attractive sides of diversity, the things that still look attractive. People are still young, people are still beautiful, they might have different genders, there'll be different ethnicities. And when we're looking at diversity and inclusivity strategies, it's also important to remember that diversity also refers to age. It also refers to ability or disability. And this idea is a really nice example of how that can be put into action. Our client L'Oreal has created a training program called Beauty for a Better Life, where they work with women in challenging, difficult contexts and regions around the world. And it's a training program for beauty and hairstyling that helps women to set up their own businesses and to find work. It's been going since 2009, so it's something that's you're also in for the long term. It's not just a short-term thing. In Vietnam, where it started, many thousands of women have been through the training program, and all of them have found work and found a way of applying their learnings in their lives after participating in the program. So what we like about this idea is it's a great example of giving regenerative actions a deeper purpose, giving actions around inclusivity and diversity a deeper purpose, particularly as the world becomes more skeptical, consumers become more critical, particularly as the theme of greenwashing is one that people become more sensitive to. It's really, really important that regenerative actions are anchored somewhere concrete. So, what now? Moving towards the end of our presentation, and we have a few minutes for questions. Maybe we can just quickly recap what we learned. We learned that we need to connect with consumers rather than educate. Most people don't want to be educated, and particularly not necessarily by brands. So if we want to take them along on the journey, we need to really connect with them. We need to understand how this plays a role in their lives. We believe that the emotional aspects of regenerative actions are extremely important. A lot of regenerative actions are based in science, but we need to take into account the emotional impact and also the social impact, because social pressure, social comparisons are really, really important in changing behavior. We need to look at the holistic experiences and not just the regenerative moment, not just the moment when doing something better for the environment or for society takes place, but how that fits into overall customer journeys. And we need to make sure that our regenerative actions have a deeper purpose. And what do we think that we can do to help or to support you in this? As a research company, we obviously think that we can help you to connect and empathize with your consumers, to really understand their daily lives, their emotions, and also beyond that, to build customer centricity within your organization. We have lots of approaches and tools that can help facilitate that. We can help you to create and shape new ideas, whether that's over our creative platform, Myacre, but also co-creation initiatives, our panorama groups, or online co-creation possibilities to bring consumers into that sort of future thinking mode. We also think that we can help you to understand journeys, customer journeys, where to engage with consumers and how to improve those experiences. And finally, looking into the future with our friends from Space Doctors to anticipate what is changing for people and for culture, and to create a meaningful future for your brand. So that's where we end, and we now have some time for questions.
Yes, indeed. There are no questions in the chat yet, or at least not in the question section. Let me check the chat. No.
I need your help because I can't see the chat.
You can see that. So if you have a question, feel free to write it in the chat. Maybe to already answer the practical question that usually comes after sessions like this. After the session, you will get an email with the recording of the session, the full report, so including all the 8 codes, so that you can easily look it up again and for your reference, use it for your own benefit. No one's typing, so I think that there are no questions. Let's give it another quick moment.
Okay. Well, we're always here for you if you have questions after the session. We're also running a little bit short on time and we obviously don't want to overrun. So maybe we just finish with a few closing slides. And as I say, if anything comes up, if you have any questions, anything you'd like to hear more about, we are here for you. We've focused now on What Matters in Germany. Looking forward, there will also be a What Matters in Europe event, which is virtual, coming up on the 27th of February, which you're very welcome to register for as well. There's a specific session which is also online for Africa, which is on the 7th of March. If any of you happen to be traveling to Dubai, there is also a live session in the Middle East, and that's happening on the 28th of February. So if there are no further questions, I'll leave you with our contact details. As I say, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Also delighted to get feedback, things that you found interesting, things that you found less interesting. And apologies again for our sound issues. As I say, dress rehearsals, but then on the day, sometimes things are not quite as planned. But I hope the session was still useful for you, inspiring, and yeah, we're here if you have any follow-ups.
Yeah, there are still no questions. So also from my side, thank you for tuning in and for joining us, and here for you whenever there's questions. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Oh, so my screen is